All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for coming and joining us for our very first open house for our comprehensive plan update. We're going to start for the assumption. We need to introduce what a comprehensive plan is. So if those of you who know this and want to skip over that section, we can go out for coffee and come back. And if you have any questions, please note them. We'll have an hour-long time for questions and answers. We really do appreciate you taking the time to come out this evening and be here in person. We really do recognize the time and the commitment to do that. We also have folks who are online right now, and we're going to be alternating questions and so forth through that process. So as we go through this and start this presentation and so forth, if you have particular questions in mind that you are ready to answer or ready for us to try to answer, keep those in mind. If there are other things that come up, please take a note of those. We will, as part of the question process, we will be using an online system for doing that. So if you have a cell phone and you're able to take a picture of the QR code in the corner, you'll be able to use your cell phone to answer the questions online. The results will be tabulated individually and so forth and appear as part of all the polls that we'll be doing. We'll have a small series of polls at the very beginning of the presentation and some other ones to follow up. If you're not comfortable using your phone, or if you don't have a phone or ready to use that, we do have paper copies for those folks who are in person. If you like to use those instead, just let one of our staff people know, and we can provide that to you along with a pen and pencil and so forth. So you can fill that out and submit that separately. In addition, if you have questions that you're not comfortable asking tonight, but come to you after the meeting, or you want to take some time to think about things, we're more than happy to receive any comments and questions through our website. We have comp plan at ci.tumwater.waus is the email address we're taking for all public comments. If you are thinking after this meeting that it would be a great opportunity for us as staff to come out and meet with you or your neighbors or your group as part of this process, please let us know. We definitely want to take advantage of all those opportunities. If everyone has had a chance to use the QR code, if not, let me know, and we'll wait until everybody is ready.
You can also just type in that web address at the top, menti.com, and then those 8 digits, and it'll bring you to the same place.
Okay. And if you need the Wi-Fi, it's Tumwater guest, and the password is Tumwater with a capital T. You need to connect to the Wi-Fi to use that.
Did anybody want a paper copy?
Need a couple more.
Okay. So for those of you who are using your cell phones or are remote, you can help us by starting to answer this first poll. Those of you who are using pen and paper, just feel free to hold on to that and address that. We'll use those results after the meeting to get an idea of who's been here and their background. Also, I think we're ready to move on to the next question, but also I want to let you know that the poll question results, as well as the presentation and as well as the other information that we'll be talking about, are all available on our website, under our comp plan website. We'll have the address for that in the presentation. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. Also, let me start with a little introductions. First of all, I'm Brad Medard. I'm the planning manager at the city of Tumwater. I've been here since 2016. This is my second go on a comprehensive plan update. This is going to be the bigger one. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be happening as part of that update. Joining me tonight is Mike Matlock, our community development director, Alyssa Jones-Woods, who is our climate coordinator, Erica Smith-Erickson, who is our associate planner, and Alex Baruch, who's also an associate planner. Erica is handling all the background information stuff, and Alex is trying to keep us all in line. If anyone needs any assistance in the room during this time, Alyssa and Mike will be able to help you. And I would also like to call out Ann Cook, who is at the front counter, who is our communications manager, and Margot, who's assisting also from our communications. Now, Margot has been with the city less than 1 month, so please treat her very nicely. You can treat us however you wish, but be very nice to her, please. One of the reasons we're asking this question, we'll be asking this throughout the evening, is about what's the best way to let people know what we're doing, is we're trying to figure out that exact question. In the old days, we could put something in the Olympian and call it good. Now that's really changed, and it changes every day as something new comes online. So a little bit of background about why we're doing this process in the first place. Number one reason is it's required by the state, but that aside, it's also a really good idea. We're forecast to grow by an initial, another 11,000 people over the next 20 years. And as part of that process, we need to be able to figure out where those new and current residents will both live, where they'll work, and where they'll be play. Now, that sounds very simple, of course, until you start to think about how people are going to get between where they live and where they work, how they're going to get water and sewer services, how they're going to make sure that we have adequate police and fire services and all that. And that's really where the comprehensive planning process comes in, because it captures all of those things and talks about the best strategies for us to try to address those things. A little bit of background in terms of our population and our housing statistics right now. I presume most of you know the city of Tumwater, and our current boundaries are shown in light tan on the screen. Those areas that are in darker tan are what is known as our urban growth area. Those are areas that are currently part of Thurston County, but have been designated as potentially areas where the city could annex into in the next 20 years. So when we're planning not only for the area that's within the city limits, but also for those areas that are outside. That's important because you'll notice as we go through the slides that a lot of the growth is going to be occurring in those urban growth areas, or is expected to occur in those urban growth areas. So here's a quick snapshot of where we are in terms of population. On the far, my left side is the 2010 census. At that time, we had about 17,000 people in the city and a little over 6,000 in our urban growth area. As the next census occurred in 2020, those numbers increased within the city to 25,000 and fell to 3,300 in the UGA, primarily for annexation of portions of those UGAs into the city, and also natural growth through new people moving into the city. Our current estimate in 2023 for our population is about 27,100. It's an estimate based on number of houses we're building and so forth, based on support from the state running the numbers. Our forecast numbers are based on something that's called the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And they're the organization that is responsible countywide for doing a lot of the forecasting and numbers that we'll be seeing tonight, as well as providing for a lot of the technical support that we use when we're developing forecasts and so forth. So these are their forecast numbers from 2018. We're looking again at 8,600 people in the UGA and a little over 37,000 in the city in 2045. Next. A little bit of background on some of the numbers. This is just a breakdown from the census and other recent surveys that have been done in terms of how that breaks out in terms of population, both in terms of language spoken at home, race and ethnicity, median age, and so forth. One important thing to note is that our average annual population growth has really stayed about the same, about 3% each year since 2000. We've fallen off in the past 10 years. So we're keeping pace, and we're keeping it at a fairly regular pace. Next slide, please. This is a little bit of employment and income background. As probably most of you are aware, we have almost an equal number of jobs in the city as we have residents, which is an unusual thing for some cities. In some cities, you'll be a veteran community. In other cities, you'll be primarily for employment and retail. We have a really good balance that way, and that's something we really want to preserve because that gives us a lot of flexibility and it gives us the ability to do things that other cities can't do. One other thing I want to call attention to is the households by income, and this is from 2021. And what this is based on is households with over 100,000 income during the year is in dark blue, and all the way down to 24,000 or less is in tan. I want to make just a note that 38% of those households are above what is known as the area median income, meaning that's the average across the county in terms of households. So for our purposes, we have almost 62% below AMI, meaning that those people do not necessarily have a lot of extra income. They're going to be impacted more when prices go up, when inflation occurs, when it's difficult to pay the rent and so forth. So just an idea of the larger community there. Next slide, please. We also really have to pay attention as part of our process to what we're expecting in terms of housing and housing development. And the reason for this is the state legislature has passed recently legislation that says essentially that we have to plan for housing for all income groups, meaning that we don't necessarily, as the city, build the housing, but we need to allow for the creation of housing by others in the private sector, in the nonprofits, and so forth. So for our purposes, we're planning right now for a little over 4,000 new housing units by 45. And in the UGA, it's going to be about 1,600 units. And so you see the difference in terms of increases, about 32% increase for what we have now in the city and about 78% outside of the city in the UGAs. Next slide, please. So what is the comprehensive plan? And why is it important? The State Growth Management Act requires cities and jurisdictions like the county to plan for their state allocated population and housing through what is known as the comprehensive planning process. The state doesn't give us the option to say, no, we don't want any more people. We're happy with what we have. We are mandated as a creature of the state to take the population that's allocated to us and plan for that. The same thing occurs when they give us an allocation for housing. On a 10-year cycle now, we are doing this comprehensive plan update process. If you were here in 2016, we were on, I believe, a 5-year process, then it was an 8-year, now we're on a 10-year. And we'll see what happens with the legislature next and whether that reduces or not. But that gives an opportunity for all the jurisdictions in the state to go through their policies and their regulations, and to make sure, number one, they're meeting current state requirements, and number two, they're meeting the actual conditions in the city, meaning what does the community want, what does the community said that we need to do, and how we're going to address those going forward. We last completed our update in 2016, so it's definitely time for us to do that again. All right. Quick question, why be involved in the periodic update? As each of us in the community is charged by the state in planning for people, jobs and housing and natural resources, it's really essential that the planning occur with the full involvement of the community in which it's occurring, meaning it's got to go beyond us at the city and staff deciding what's appropriate. More importantly, when you get involved in the planning process, you could help determine those priorities. How are we going to handle those additional populations? Where is it going to happen? What kind of housing are we going to do? What kind of programs do we need to support in order to get to those goals? All of those things play a part in shaping the future of the community. Little simplistic diagram of how this all fits. On this top, we have the requirements that are set by the state under growth management for how we plan and how we go forward. Those in turn are translated into the comprehensive plan, which is a policy document. Very broad policies. It gives implementation actions. It identifies specific things that we're going to be doing in order to make sure we address the growth that's coming and so forth. In turn, those policies and goals are translated into the development code. The development code is what is actually used when you want to build something. You own property and you want to add to your house. If you own a blank piece of property and you want to build a new building, the development code tells you what kind of uses are allowed where, how big the box you can build would be, and so forth. So again, the plan is not only a physical document, one that you'll be able to review and provide input into the language that goes into it, but it's also the documentation process, the conversational process that we go through in order to create the plan. It's important for the city because the plan in turn, through its goals, policies, and implementation actions, guide the day-to-day decisions by the mayor and the city council and city staff for managing the city's policymaking and investment choices for the next 20 years. So on one hand, you have policy, and more importantly, we have investment, meaning where do we put the money for improvements to our roads, improvements to our services for fire and police, water, sewer, all those things. It really takes into account the fact that we have limited resources, not only as the city government, but also within the community. We don't have infinite sources of money to do everything we want to do, so we have to make wise and efficient choices with the resources that we do have. Finding investments, as I talked about, with capital facilities and staffing, building infrastructure, establishing annual work programs for all the departments, adopting new development regulations, and so forth. Next, please. Talk a little bit about how it's a blueprint for development, where in type and intensity, and what kind of services to support it. As I mentioned, it's going to cover 20 years. It's going to be addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's important that we account for everyone in the community and be able to reach out to everyone to be who is a member of the community now. And again, it's about applying the ability to figure out where we're going to put new people, both as residents, additional housing units, as well as plan for 10,000 new jobs in the city and where those are going to be located. We also have some very specific state required changes. We have a lot of them, but I've just called out some very important ones that I think are probably the headlines for this particular update. The first is affordable housing. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about what that means and the requirements for that. But it is very clear and has been clear since I've been at the city that it is a priority that we need to build more housing, period. Then we can talk about affordable side of housing, and then we can talk about permanent supportive housing. All of those things are part of that discussion. We also are addressing climate change as part of the comprehensive plan this time. And then the reason for that is the state has passed recent legislation that says we must include a climate element as part of that process. Now, we have done a lot of the work already as part of our climate mitigation plans and so forth, but we'll have to do some additional work to incorporate that in all the policies and with everything else. Transportation, obviously, is always going to be an important thing because that's a very important and an expensive thing to do. And if we're going to do improvements, we want to be efficient with the resources we have and know where those things are going to be going. So getting a taste, I think, of what growth means for us. I'm sure you already know if you're paying property taxes, what it does mean for you. But in terms of what that money in turn is spent on, in transportation, we have to deal with increased demand for roads, transit, sidewalks, transit facilities, and so forth. Solid waste, we need to account for garbage and recycling facilities. You know, where are the support facilities going to be located for the garbage collection and so forth? We need to allow for some of those things. On the supply side for water, we need to account not only for the fact that we have adequate water to support growth, but we also have the adequate means to get water where it needs to go for fire and for domestic service. Similar issues with sewage, stormwater. In terms of parks and recreation, police, and fire and emergency service, it really comes down to facilities and personnel. Having the adequate facilities and the adequate people to use those things and support everything else. All this growth in turn affects everybody else. So we're talking about growth in the city. We need to be also talking with the school districts, talking with the library, and all those other organizations are going to be affected by what's happening. Talk a little bit about what the development regulations are. I'll go to the second part. One of the important parts of the comprehensive planning process is to create or update the current map that we use, indicating what particular uses go where in the city. Whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, whether it's industrial, what level of intensity of those uses are, all of those things, part of that. That in turn translates into the zoning map that is used as a regulatory tool to allow for particular things in the city. So I think this is probably the most important slide of all the presentation. And I think this is the most important point that I can make. There are three general levels to planning in the city, planning and permitting in the city. The first level is plan updates and code adoption, which is where we are right now. And that's a legislative process. That is something that ultimately the city council will approve and put into law. Below that, and coming out of that process, are things like discretionary permits, meaning things that if you subdivide a property or a developer subdivides a property or does a conditional use permit, there is a very specific process, a quasi-legal process that is followed. If a project meets these criteria, bam, bam, there's an opportunity there for public input, but nowhere near the level of public and community input as that very first level. And then finally, things like a building permit, where really the opportunity for public input is very limited because the building codes are very specific. Thou shalt use this size beam, this size water pipe, this so forth. So if you are looking for the opportunity to have a say and an influence on what is happening in the city, this is the time to do so. And I really do appreciate the time and effort that you are showing by coming out and any of the questions that you may have as part of this process. So again, our objective is really to provide meaningful opportunities for you to engage with the staff, to engage with the planning commission, to engage with the city council. So we are definitely open to any and all ideas and opportunities we have to go out and talk with you and anything else as part of this process. So in addition to some of the very specific topics we're dealing with, think about the broader, how do we get the message out? How do we involve more people? How do we make sure that those voices are brought into the conversation? We have what is known as a community engagement plan that sort of lays out what we think is the process for helping us get that kind of input into the process. We make a very important point that the community engagement process is something that's very flexible, meaning that what we said that we were going to do can change and will change to make it better during the process. We're not gonna wait until the end and make changes. So this is another opportunity to be thinking about. So in general, the update process looks like this. The step one and throughout, meaning that throughout all of these steps is engaging the community. First of all, on this kind of level, the online survey that we are doing, the ongoing meetings that we have monthly with the Planning Commission and the City Council on the comprehensive plan update, and any and all other opportunities we can identify as part of that process. Step two, we're right now involved in gathering and analyzing data on all of these things that we have. We have a lot of guidance material that has come through from the state telling us the best way to do something. It's very lengthy, it's very detailed. It's also available to you. It's also available on our website. So anytime we're doing something as part of this update process, you have the ability to go in and read the background information, the same stuff we're reading, to tell us what we need to do. We're going to be looking at evaluating and updating our policies. And then finally, we're going to be reviewing and updating our regulations. So it's an all-in-one kind of deal. It's a three-phase process. As you know, it really overlaps. We talked a little bit of public engagement and all those opportunities that we have for engagement. We have the plan development phase, which is a formal development. It's a formal process where we meet with the Planning Commission and the City Council on a monthly basis to go over particular elements. The public is always welcome to those meetings, either they're remote and in person if you choose to attend. And then we have our formal plan adoption process. And that's where we actually have ordinances drafted to go with all the other language. And we have a formal public hearing with formal public hearing requirements and everything else, where you have an opportunity to be on the record on particular issues. Our intent, however, is to make sure that your voices are included before we get to that public hearing stage, because we want to make sure as we're developing the plan that we have your voices incorporated in there, and that the council and the Planning Commission have seen and heard those as part of this process. We're looking at a process that, according to the state, we have to finish by June of next year. We're crossing our fingers that the state will approve legislation, giving us another 6 months to meet those requirements and not pass a whole slew of legislation that I've seen this year that adds to additional requirements. We'll see how that works. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask where this is supposed to be?
This is actually supposed to be, I believe, the brewery district.
Brewery district, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the conceptual drawings done for the brewery district plan. Now, I apologize, that's an older edition Cadillac that no longer probably is on the road, but,
I'm wondering what road is that?
Custer?
Custer,
That's
yeah.
Custer.
So Safeway's down the road and to the right.
Yeah,
I mean, not the one that's
Where's
going to
that
craft
brewery?
That's the craft.
The rest of the brewery there.
yeah, so the triangle area that's north of the old brewery, that's a part of the brewery district, so that's. So we've talked a little bit already about some of the primary issues. I want to give you an idea of all the things that are a part of the comprehensive plan. So if there's a particular issue that you're concerned with or a particular item that you're concerned with, you could focus on particular items. Now, the intent of part of this process is that we develop all these things together, that they're intertwined, interlinked between each other. But again, they're going to be dealing with separate aspects of the planning. The first and foremost thing I think to pay attention to is what's known as our capital facilities plan. And that's essentially our assessment and funding strategies for 6 years for city projects, basically to accommodate the next cycle of growth. If you're looking for an opportunity to know how we're implementing the comprehensive plan, the capital facilities plan is truly the implementation document. It's calling out the roadways that need to be improved, water and sewer systems that need to be expanded, city facilities as part of the growth and all those kinds of things. We will be doing a capital facilities update as part of this process, because we need to do that every 2 years, and it will fall in 2025, the next time we need to do that. We have a conservation element. As part of the Growth Management Act, we need to address critical areas. And critical areas are things like wetlands, steep slopes, aquifer recharge areas, and so forth. And we need to have policies and protections in there for those areas. At the same time, we're trying to deal with development in other areas. We also have an economic development plan, because obviously it's very important. As you saw, we have to plan for 10,000 new people coming in for employment. That means we need to, number one, keep what we have now and expand on that. So all of that will be part of the plan. The housing element will play a much bigger role this year than it has in previous years because of state requirements, but it's also really covering a lot of different things. Housing stock to affordable housing for all economic segments. There's also what's known as the Thurston-Tumwater Joint Plan, and that's the plan that addresses growth in the urban growth area. We won't be updating that plan as part of this process because we just finished an update in 2021 for that. I anticipate that we'll be turning around and looking for opportunities to update that after we finish our updates, but it's not something that we brought into this process. Land use element, again, is where individual land uses are located throughout the city. Lands for public purposes element identifies all the facilities that we'll need and that will be addressed in turn by the capital facilities plan, so for solid waste, sanitary sewer, water system, and so forth. Parks and Recreation and Open Space Plan, that is definitely something that we need to be updating. It won't be something we'll be updating as part of this process because we don't have the funding or staff at the moment to deal with that. But we know we need to do that. We have what's known as a Shoreline Master Program in the city that deals with the Deschutes and lakes and so forth that are part of the state-required Shoreline Management Act. We are fortunately updated that about 5 years ago. We are current and we don't have to touch that again until 2030. So that means we don't have extended conversations with the Department of Ecology. We'll be talking with them about a lot of other things though. Transportation plan covers not only roads, but bikes, sidewalks, transit, and so forth. And finally, utilities deals with the private utilities, so cable, electricity, and so forth. I want to touch a little bit on the housing element and what things we're going to be focusing on. According to the State Department of Commerce, we're going to need 1.1 million new homes in the next 20 years. And what you see here is a breakdown on the bottom, starting from permanent supportive housing on the left side, all the way up to housing for those with households above 120% AMI, and the numbers underneath it. An important thing to notice in terms of the need here. Currently, we fill the gap in the red section between 50 to 100%, 120%, okay, pretty well. It's the lower and the upper ends that we don't hit very well, that we're going to have to do a lot of work to plan for. In addition to that, we have emergency housing needs that we need to address as part of the update. Again, the goal established in the Growth Management Act is to plan for and accommodate housing affordable to all economic segments of the population of the state, promoting a variety of residential densities and housing stock and encouraging preservation of existing stock. Meaning we don't want to lose what we currently have, but we also need to allow for a variety of housing that we may not have in the community right now. I love giant tables with big numbers on it. There wasn't a simple way to do this, but I'm going to use this anyway. So the state allocated to the counties housing for all economic groups. And these are numbers that we can't change. It's basically said, thou shalt do this, and we said, that's nice, we'll do that. This is the breakdown for Thurston County by a total number. We need about 54,000. And then by income level, which is all those areas in the purple. Again, you'll notice the high numbers, again, are the under 30%, under 50%, and under 80%. And then suddenly it drops between 80 and 120%. We're doing well in the area between 80 to 120% in terms of producing housing that's affordable to those income groups. Now, little background. Our area median income for Thurston County is slightly over 100,000. So anybody below that falls below 100%, anybody above that is above 100%. We have a calculation has been done to allocate specific amounts of housing to the city that we need to account for that follows this pattern pretty closely. I'll just run through these fairly quickly, and I also want to emphasize that another topic for a different open house will be housing and a lot of other things like this. So I'm just going to touch briefly on this. Our requirements are we have to produce an inventory of what we have. We need to evaluate existing projected housing needs, specifically for moderate, low, very low, and extremely low income households. That's new, that's different. We haven't had to do that in the past. We also need to manage projected growth for emergency housing, shelters, and permanent supportive housing. And that means typically public supportive housing for the life of the project. We need to include preservation, improvement, and development of housing. We need to identify sufficient capacity of land for this housing and provision of needs for all economic segments. Next, please. Another important thing that was passed by the legislature in 2021 is the need for us to deal with racially disparate impacts. And essentially what we are charged with as part of this update process is looking to identify and implement policies and regulations that begin to undo things that have occurred in the past, either through, intentionally or unintentional consequences. We need to identify those areas that are higher risk of displacement. As development occurs, those areas are going to be changing over. What happens to the people living in those neighborhoods? How do we address those? And we need to establish anti-displacement policies. This also comes into play when we're talking about things like manufactured home parks. That's a very big component of our housing stock in the city, an important component of our affordable housing stock. And that's one of the related things that we're dealing with here. In terms of the climate element, we have three different things that we're going to be dealing with as part of that. The first is dealing with actions that we can take to reduce overall greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. Meaning, what other options on the transportation side can we develop that reduce the need for people to go in a car or travel far distances to do things in terms of services, employment, and so forth. We also need to deal with climate resilience, which is the idea being that if we know that certain hazards, natural hazards are going to be occurring and that could be exacerbated potentially by climate change, how are we dealing with those before they become a problem? Allowing people to build in the floodplain, is that a great idea? Probably not, if we're going to have to pay ultimately to help, solve the problem after the fact. And we also need to, as part of the state requirements, deal with environmental justice to avoid worsening environmental health disparities. So next steps in the process. We talked a little bit about what we're doing right now for community engagement. This year will be our plan development phase. We'll having more open houses, more discussions about what the plan is and how we're going to do it. And we're looking at 2025 as our legislative adoption process, the formal process of adopting everything. Next. A little bit about our project website. So all of the documents related to the periodic update are located on this web page. If you need the access, the link to that, or you can just go onto the city webpage and ask for the 2025 comprehensive plan update. It includes everything from how to be involved, our public schedule, city meetings, as well as all of the documents that we're producing, from the draft elements to the guidance documents from the state, to the staff reports, to the presentations, and all of those things. Now, this currently includes everything that we have presented to the Planning Commission and the City Council to date. And we have introduced all of the elements, introduced all of the requirements as part of that process. So if you are interested, you're more than welcome to go and look through and download the presentations, download the staff reports, and so forth. That's probably a good way to bring yourself up to speed if you would like to do that. Next, please. And then finally, for submitting comments or questions, we're definitely welcome at any time during the update process. Again, the periodic update email is complan@ci.tumwaterlaw.us. And a city contact, you can contact me, either by telephone, in person, mail, whatever. So that concludes the presentation. We have
Few more poll questions.
a few more poll questions to sort of set the stage for questions that are coming from you. Thank you.
Seems like we've got a good group interested in all of these housing topics, which is great. We'll definitely be bringing these up during future open houses, so that's great to see. Similarly, have a good spread here of interest, so that's great to see again. Never seen so many people interested in traffic modeling before, but that's exciting.
A quick question for those in person. How many are traffic engineers and why are you at this meeting? It's a word from you. Newspapers.
Still a required area for putting it in there. All right, the next two slides just have some questions if you'd like to be added to a newsletter and kind of be contacted for some future opportunities for engagement. So feel free to enter the information if you'd like. It's not required, obviously, but feel free to enter that information if you're interested.
So if you're still filling out the form, you can continue to do so. What I'd like to do is, we've got an hour or so set aside for questions. We've got about 16, 18 people online, we've got about 50 or so in person here in the room. To make sure for the folks, and everybody has an opportunity to speak and ask questions if they need to, we ask that you limit your comments or questions to about a minute to 2 minutes at the most, just to ensure that we can get everybody in who might want to speak. We'd like to alternate between the folks who are online and also in the room. For those of you in the room, we ask that you come to the podium and ask your question, not because this is a formal public hearing, it's because we have our microphone system is not the greatest, and we want to make sure, number one, that the people online can also hear your questions, and if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. We would like to start first with any general questions in the audience in the room. So if you have anything, please. We've got a couple.
Can you explain how we have an existing zoning, how the comprehensive plan interacts with that, how we will change the zoning, if at all?
Okay. So in the comprehensive plan, we have something that's called a future land use map, which is essentially, currently is almost the same thing as our zoning map. And it establishes those areas in the city that develop as residential, commercial, and industrial. It establishes various levels of development densities, for example. So higher density areas are located closer to transit. Lower densities are in areas that have, say, critical areas or farther away from transit, those kinds of things. Currently, our comprehensive plan maps match up pretty closely to our zoning map. So if we make a change in one, and the changes it covers in the other. One of the things that we're considering right now, looking at for the comprehensive plan, is to reduce the number of land use designations to give us more flexibility on the zoning side. So for example, if somebody wants to make a zoning change now, they have to change not only the zoning map, which is a legislative thing that I can occur any time during the year, as well as an amendment to the comprehensive plan, which is limited to once per year. And that can be a lengthy process. So, does that answer the question? Okay.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go back and forth.
Oh, thanks.
Yes. So someone was asking about the results of the recent survey. We posted a community survey. We also have postcards available tonight if you want to take a survey. It has a little bit more in-depth questions. The survey is currently still open and going until February 14th.
We're also been very pleased with the response rate. I think we're probably over 900 responses. Our intent is, once the survey closes, to publish the results of that, let people know what the answers to the questions were, a lot of the concerns were, and so forth as part of that process.
So this is a 20-year plan. I'd like you to explain the plan for the East Street extension, because we've been asking since March and haven't been told really anything.
So, and thank you. Patty and her neighbors also came and met with myself and our transportation manager back in March of last year. And we encouraged them, obviously, to take part of this process. There really hasn't been a change in that plan yet, but as part of the comprehensive plan update process, when we're updating the transportation plan, we can have a conversation again about the East Street extension, what that could potentially look like, and so forth. Once we're really in sort of the planning stages rather than the actual construction stage, so the actual outline of what it's going to look like hasn't been decided on yet. It's been a red line on a map and potential locations. But I encourage you to follow the process and include your comments and so forth as part of this process, because this is the time where we can have a conversation as part of this process.
Well, okay, I'll email you because we have not been part of the process. We've been asking to, and we are not involved in anything. And emails, we've been to meetings, we've been to council meetings, and we don't get any response of any kind. And we've already seen on your webpage the route that you want to take, which we're objecting to. Objecting to the East Street extension, just the route you want, and you're not letting us be involved in any of that. You've already got the money, what you want, and everything. And when you're gonna start construction, 2025 to 2028.
So, I apologize for the lack of communication and things you've been sending us, and if I haven't been responding personally to that, I apologize. I just want to make it clear that the process for updating the plan and process for working through those issues is part of this process that we're currently involved in. And this is really the start of that process. All of the other planning processes and everything else in terms of what has been produced to date has been part of the internal process and can be changed. But I encourage you, again, I apologize for if you haven't been getting responses from our staff or from our council. That's not our intent.
Changes, because you guys are talking, your first step is involve the community,
Mhm.
so.
I agree.
Okay. If you guys would go by what you say.
Yes. What? Okay. Yes.
So you can refer me back to.
I apologize. Could you come to the,
Yes.
and I apologize for
No,
that.
You can refer me back to your website if that's where I can find the information, but I don't want to get up against, I have a couple. I know it's mentioned there that the growth by 2045 will be about 11,000 people. Have we considered people that will move out, that will leave a lot of unoccupied areas, people that will sell land, whether it's private or, in that area? So I can find that information on your website, I'm assuming?
So the details on how the state actually arrived at the numbers, I'll probably have to do some digging and get that information to you. What the overall number for 11,000 includes those coming in, moving into the area, births and deaths, and those leaving. So it's sort of the overall, at the end of 10 years, we'll have 11,000. How those numbers were arrived at, I could do some digging and find out what the Office of Financial Management used to develop those figures.
I think my concern, just looking at the overall picture, is going around and seeing a lot of empty spaces that are not being put to use, old buildings maybe, people that have moved out and abandoned stuff. How do we contact those people to get them to do something, whether it will be convenient for them for the city to take over their land and buy it out? Another thing is, we're saying there's going to be about 10,000 employees. What about the local people that will decide to take some of those jobs and not commute anymore? Are we taking those people in consideration? Because I know we're doing a lot of projection, and it's hard to project what some people might or might not do with things that they might not like. Like, I know for us, we moved quite a bit in a very short amount of time due to jobs. So my husband moved us how many times? 3 times? 2 years? Less than 2 years? Love it here. Let's hope we do stay, but we do have those people that will do that. Are we somewhere in our heads kind of like taking that in consideration? For like what's going on in our neighborhood, are we getting that plan in place because of the increase that we plan in the future of all these people coming over, or is it just to better what we already have as far as commuting?
Yes. It actually, it covers all of those things. One, you brought up some points that I kind of want to touch on a little bit. And number one, what happens in terms of development within the community and who's going to be doing that and what kind of things are going to be built and what kind of jobs are going to come in and all of that is really a private sector issue. 90% plus of all the development that's going to be occurring is going to be made by individual landowners deciding that they want to do something. The city has the ability to sort of set the framework for how that occurs, how it could look, provide routes for that to occur, make it easier for that to occur. One thing I want to also touch on is the concern with abandoned properties and redevelopment. I'm sure we don't need to talk about the brewery, and we won't. And it is an ongoing issue. That's an ongoing issue that the city is trying to work with multiple partners to try to address. But on the local level, like abandoned houses and so forth, we in the past in the city have worked with nonprofits that are active in the community to see if we can work out some way for them to purchase the property, put it back into use and so forth. So what I'm saying is there's an opportunity for identifying big solutions, Rory, and little solutions that make a difference over time in dealing with, you know, abandoned properties and so forth and putting those to better use.
One more, I'm sorry.
Ma'am, if I,
Also talking about making affordable housing. I know that's a big beast because it entails a lot of different populations, but this also brings in social service, right? This is a something that's getting worse. And there's a lot of things that go into why it's getting worse. Have we identified with the proper agencies how big of an issue are we facing? What are some of the steps we can take? Like, I know that there is people that do nonprofit, like you said, and there is people that have houses that house certain populations in their houses. Are we looking into maybe offering incentives to open up more of that, to make it affordable? Maybe, I don't know, in different states it's called different things. Some offer vouchers, maybe giving a higher voucher so those people can afford houses. More talking in the social services aspect. Have we looked into some of that?
yeah, and I apologize. Standing up and asking questions. In terms of the affordable housing and how that looks and how that works in the community, there's a range of income groups and what, you know, permanently supportive housing all the way to housing on the higher end. The intent really is for those in dealing with the homelessness issue and dealing with the ability for people to stay in their homes so they don't get into homelessness and so forth is really been the biggest issue that we've dealt with in the city in the past 5 years. And it's not an easily problem to solve. There is some data that suggests that probably the primary cause for homelessness, at least in our community, is the fact we don't have housing. That sounds kind of simple. What that means is we don't have the beds or the places or the cheap apartments or whatever for people, first of all, to get off the streets, to get into something and to start a process. There is going to be an element of a population that is always going to need support services. And that could be anything from, if we're talking on the senior citizen side, to folks with developmental disabilities, to certain homeless things that we're trying to deal with larger issues so they can become reintegrated into society. All of those things require social services and support services to get people to the situation where they're not in those dependent kind of things. So, yes, ma'am, you had a question. Yes, please.
Part of it is a response to you, and then also a question to you. I'm assuming you're working closely with the Tumwater School District because the schools are busting at the seams in Tumwater, which is not the case in Olympia right now. Olympia School District is closing schools. Tumwater is busting at the seams. So to answer your question, if they're looking at growth based on the schools, we need more schools. There are young families coming to Tumwater, which means in 5 to 10 years, we are going to need more homes. Absolutely. And then the other thing I was going to say was I work in social services. I also work in Tumwater schools, and we need all the help we can get. It's a crisis. I mean, if you speak with anyone working in schools right now, there are so many homeless families. It's increased in Tumwater. I started in Tumwater 5.5 years ago. It's, I would say, triple the amount.
I don't think that's a debate. I think it's more of the projection of the people that will also move out. Granted, we have cycles all the time.
I don't see people leaving Tumwater, but I see a whole lot of families coming.
Jim, if you'd like to come to the.
it's my understanding from what we've said, that we're gonna significantly increase our, higher density and our lower income housing. And it's my assumption, and that this is just an impression, not based on any facts, that, higher density, particularly low income communities demand or need more services, from police and fire, as medical, and schools and such. And it's my understanding that a few months ago, we voters of Tumwater failed to pass an increase in the taxes for our fire department. And the fire department are not city employees. It's a separate regional fire or something.
No, it's a city department, so it is.
So, I'm assuming that we're hurting right now for fire and medical in particular, and we're gonna see this growth, particularly in a population that will require more than our current level of need per citizen. Is that correct? And in this comprehensive plan, do we have a way to deal with the increased need for fire and medical and police?
Thank you for the question, Jim. So the answer is yes, that is something we will need to be addressing as part of our comprehensive plan update process. Just to give you information, if you weren't aware of that, the city and the police department are city departments, meaning that they use general funds to pay for their facilities and their personnel. Water is currently owned by the city of Tumwater, same deal, facilities and everything run by them. Sewer services, we work with LOT as the regional entity, but we're responsible for everything getting it to the treatment plant. So the pump stations, the pipes and everything else. So unlike some jurisdictions, like Lacey, for example, they have a fire district, which is a separate entity. It's not part of the city. When we're doing our comprehensive planning process, we have to account for and work closely with our other departments to make sure that what we're projecting for need and so forth is going to be met by the appropriate levels of staffing and supplies. I don't know if there's a connection necessarily between different income groups and the need for services. That's something we'll definitely be exploring as part of the update process. But that's going to be, we've got a lot, what I want to say is we have a lot of unanswered questions that we're going to need to answer.
Yeah, we did have a question. Are new schools going to be built to accommodate the increase in residents?
So one thing that we do, one thing we don't have under the city is schools. That's the Tumwater School District, and for a small part of the city, the Olympia School District. School districts go through a very similar capital facility planning process that we go through when we deal with fire and sewer and water and all that. They do so for their school facilities. And we'll be coordinating with them in terms of what we're expecting in terms of population, where those populations are going to be located. We think, obviously, somebody's going to have to build those things for those things to happen. But we will be coordinating with the school district to make sure that they can incorporate all that into their planning. We do know, as part of their capital facilities plans, that they have allocated land and intention for new schools within the community. The funding for that is another thing, because that is a huge state part. There's local funds involved, but there's also a big state match. So how that works out and all that will be something that we'll be working with the school district on. Yes, but if you, again.
Okay, so as far as the funding, originally when the lottery was started, the funding for education was supposed to be, majority of that money go to education. And then the casinos, all the, tax money that we should have gotten from there was supposed to go to education. So what happened to all those funds? I mean, the majority of our property taxes are in school taxes and that. So I'd like to know what the state's done with all that money. So, and then, and one other thing, as far as the services, fire services and stuff, I mean, the majority, if you talk to anyone in those departments, the majority of their calls are to homeless camps. So maybe we need to fix that problem, and then we wouldn't need so much fires in that. And I don't think housing is the big thing. I think it's affordable housing. There's there's lots of apartments and houses. People can't afford them. So I think that's the biggest problem. So anyway, okay. See, I didn't talk about East Street this time.
Hi, I live in a neighborhood down east of the airport. There was a lot of talk about the airport and the possible SeaTac-sized airport up a year ago until that was tabled. How does this plan, because it's not dead, there's just a new planning process starting up, I think, is what I understand. Different people to table, but there's still going to be something going on. How does this plan, how do we in Tumwater jive with whoever is at that table? Do we sit on that committee? You know, and I'm starting to hear little bits about, you know, some people have ideas that would probably impact the Olympia Airport, which is actually in Tumwater. And I know those of us that live down there, I haven't lived there it's only 5 years now, but it feels like there's more helicopter noise and low-flying helicopters each year that I've lived there, and new people moved in just recently and went, oh my God, what is going on with the helicopters? So at some point, it's going to have to be dealt with, whether it's the way it is now or what it's going to be like in the future. So I'm just curious how we, in our planning process, I don't think we get to plan the airport, but how do we influence that plan?
No, you brought up, obviously, the airport is entirely within the city of Tumwater, the Olympia Regional Airport. And it obviously occupies a large portion of the land in the city. We coordinate with the Port of Olympia in terms of what their master plan is for the airport. And that's our mechanism for, you know, saying, does this really work, and how much influence we have on what they choose to do. There is something under state law which is known as essential public facilities. And those essentially are things that everybody uses but nobody wants in their backyard. Prisons, airports, large facilities, you know, those kinds of things. Airports are definitely one of those things. We are constrained under state law on what we can and can't do in terms of that. My belief is I don't think the Olympia Airport itself is a solution to the larger regional SeaTac part. It's just not big enough. There's just too expensive to do stuff. So that's why they're looking around in very strange places deep in the county to locate an airport. That's a state process. The state legislature decides who is on those committees, who's represented. We have the opportunity to comment. We've commented in the past on particular proposals that have come forth. We're not necessarily in support of a lot of the expansions that have been talked about or new airports that are located for a variety of reasons. But that's a process that really is sort of outside of this comprehensive planning process for us. We have to account for the Port of Olympia Airport, and we need to plan for uses that are most appropriate around the airport and that kind of thing, but we don't necessarily plan for what's on the airport proper and how that's developed, which is another reason to pay attention to what's happening at the port and also with the legislature on the airport issue. Yes.
I'm curious, what kind of responsibility the state has taken for the transportation issues within Tumwater? I mean, is the city responsible for all the increase in traffic, or does the state take responsibility for all the state buildings that are here that partially are empty now because of home, you know, working at home? And are they going to open those up to the city for like future employment growth and give, you know, the city a good price for empty buildings?
So two questions there, part of, you know, transportation and then also state facilities, obviously, that are a huge component of our employment. I don't believe the state actually owns any offices in Tumwater.
They do L and I.
They own the L and I
L and
building.
I.
Okay, so aside from the L and I building, I don't think it's actually a private entity that leases, the health department that has reduced their staffing in the city. So we have definitely been in conversations with the property owners about what other uses can be happening in those areas. Either retrofit them to be reused again for office space or to be used for some other purpose. Because they don't want to have that area sit vacant either because they don't earn any income from it and so forth. So yes, actually that's a very important one. One of the things that the state legislature passed, I'm just off on a tangent, is making it easier for property owners who own commercial property to change that into residential property. We are starting to see more conversations on that. We haven't seen any examples yet, but that is definitely something that we're looking at. Wanted to touch on, what was the question? The state transportation facilities. For our purposes, development within the city is almost entirely on local roads. We send traffic onto I-5, obviously. The state has the ability through the State Environmental Policy Act to provide comment, require mitigation, and so forth. But there aren't any state facilities other than I-5 and a short portion of 93rd that are state facilities as such. So when we're talking about transportation level improvements and so forth, we're almost entirely talking about stuff that's generated internally, our trips, our facilities, and how do we deal with that kind of stuff.
All right, online we have a question. Is the city trying to attract any specific types of businesses to meet future demand? Have we identified any types of businesses we currently lack? Let's say we wanted to attract a food co-op, for example. What kind of tools could be used, if any?
I wish our economic development manager was here. I should have just let the air out of his tires. We share an office. We are definitely pursuing particular types of businesses and so forth. One primary example of that, and this is part of the larger brewery district redevelopment, is the Craft District project. And the commercial hall that's just opened there, and the distilling center and the educational facility there and so forth. That's probably the best example I have of something that the city is supporting because, number one, it involves a lot of local entrepreneurs, brings them together, harnesses local energy to benefit the community, and hopefully, cross your fingers, is a catalyst for larger development and redevelopment of the former brewery site. So that's probably the big example of what kind of thing we focus on. I don't think, other than that, we don't have a hit list of this is what we always want. We're not looking for, I think we're open for business for whoever. If you have somebody who'd like to talk.
We do have one city council strategic priority for recruiting green jobs and employment as well.
Yeah.
So that is a priority
Thank
for our
you.
city council.
I'm sorry. Thanks.
On this E Street extension, thank you to my neighbors here. I'm sure they're the ones that I learned about it from, on the 4,000 block of Cleveland. And were it not for her and her group, I may not have found out about this until the roundabout was being built in my front yard. So this is a done deal. The E Street extension is not a done deal. You may not do it.
No, what?
There's more parts to the question, so.
Let you
Okay, so the rest of the question would be then, is that you're suggesting right now through the drawing I saw, you're going to the south side of the tank, of the water tank. Are you going there for topographical reasons? Is it shallower? Or instead of going to the other side, the south side of the tank, or the north side of the tank, which is very steep? And in the future, if you guys wouldn't mind, there's not very many of us on Cleveland Avenue. Could you come out and talk to us directly and just say, hey, we're gonna put a roundabout here, so thought you should know. So Okay, thanks.
Thank you for your input. So very quickly, my understanding is that the planning for, the E Street extension really comes out of first of all, it's a local need and a regional need that's been identified, and has been discussed for a number of years now. It was included as part of our brewery district plan as a red line on the map. And the primary concern there is we funnel all of the traffic from Yelm Highway and the east onto Custer, which doesn't have the capacity, it's just not big enough. So we were looking for alternatives. One of the things that was discussed is obviously looking at a new bridge over the Deschutes, which has become the E Street extension. My understanding of what the current potential looking design for that is based on cost. The fact that the topography is an issue, the fact that the city owns property in one place and not in the other, that kind of thing. I'm not aware of the parameters, other parameters or the details of that, but that is definitely something we could bring into the conversation. I will definitely be talking with our transportation manager about making sure that we do more, I think, on the community level when we're doing very specific things in the community. As you're all aware, we have a very, very large construction project everywhere. And it's essential that we have good communications, letting people know what's going to happen, what the impacts would be. So
We found when we did the brewery district plan, we modeled, if you run all that cross-town traffic through Custer, what does that cross-section look like? How many lanes each way? There's 4 lanes each direction. It'd be an 8-lane Custer way, and we could not imagine how that would ever work, and that's where we started thinking about, there's gotta be some other way to get people through the valley, and that's where E Street came from.
I've been there on Cleveland for 35 years now. My neighbor over here, I think he's been there for probably close to 55 years. So we kind of knew this was coming after the brewery closed, that something was gonna happen, so, yeah, but anyway, thanks.
do you have any more?
Yep, we have one more online. All right, I would like to know more about shelter for families and youth. Does the city have a place in mind and estimated time?
So one of the things that we will have to address as part of the development code update is we have some issues dealing with homelessness that we'll have to address. Currently, the city works with the Regional Housing Council, which is made up of Thurston County and the other cities and towns in the county on solutions and ways to address not only the homeless side, but also the transitional side into affordable housing and so forth. The city itself does not own or operate shelters. That's not our business, that's not our specialty. We don't want to be doing that if we're not trained and are adequately part of that. But we are part of conversations with those in the community who do that kind of thing. One of the things that has come up is, and this is first of all come down from the state, is where those facilities could potentially locate. The state has passed legislation recently that basically said that we have to allow for those kinds of facilities in any area in the city that currently allows multifamily or hotels, for example. We have not, however, had any discussions with any particular nonprofits or any developers of any sort for that kind of housing or those kinds of services. What we typically see on a regional level is perhaps 1 or maybe 2 of those things occurring every 3 years, meaning those kinds of facilities. You may be aware of a project called Maple Court, which is in Lacey. It's a conversion of a former motel up in Hawks Prairie. The reason why that has been developed and redeveloped is there's been a very specific infusion of state funds that have allowed for the development and redevelopment of that property for that use and for the provision of the ongoing services that are needed for the residents there. If you've heard of the right-of-way initiative, the cleaning up of I-5, that's where that money comes from. Until we have more funding coming from the state level, I don't necessarily see more shelters being put into place because they're expensive. First of all, to get them in going, and then more importantly, on an annual basis to make sure you've got the adequate services to make sure they function correctly and get people up and out to the next stage.
Thank you, Brad. It's my understanding that the tribes own property in Tumwater, including the corner of Israel and Little Rock Road. The old food liner is now owned by, I think, the Squaxin tribe. And I believe Northgate, the old grocery store in Southgate, I guess, Pharmacy, that's now owned by the tribes. It's my understanding that the tribes, after 5 years, this is kind of neighbor to neighbor talk, don't have to follow the city regulations for zoning and development and whatever. Is that correct? And how does the tribal use of property inside Tumwater fit with the comprehensive plan? For example, is there going to be a casino built at Southgate or here on the corner of Israel and Little Rock Road because it's tribal and they can do whatever they want to do? Thank you.
I'm not aware of that. Southgate is in the process of transferring to tribal ownership, but I can definitely find out more about that. The process that I'm familiar with is what is known as property being put into federal trust for the benefit of the local tribes. And we do have trust land within the city. First of all, the new truck stop on 93rd, that's located on the southwest corner, that is the Chehalis tribe. That is in trust for them. So what that effectively means is, and this is through the treaties that the tribe signed with the federal government, is that they have sovereignty over land use of those areas. And they're outside of, we don't exercise control. We're not, we don't stand above them. The federal government stands above them. What we do, however, is because those facilities usually require some level of city services, say for water and for sewer and so forth, we definitely want to encourage conversations with them about what is being developed, how it's being developed, and how it works with things that are surrounding them. So while we may not have regulatory authority, we do definitely have conversations with them about how best to make all those things work, what the tribe would like to do and what the city would like to see to do in these areas. This will be an ongoing issue. Lacey just has the area around Cabela's just been purchased by Nisqually's and into trust, so that will be an ongoing thing. Yes, please.
So,
I'm sorry.
so these are,
First, I
oh,
apologize.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I feel like I'm the only one.
Okay, as far as the tribal lands, were these originally their lands? I mean, they're purchasing something, I thought, are they paying property taxes?
It is as a treaty with the federal government, they have the ability to choose and to go through a process to take land into their sovereignty.
Okay,
And that's essentially what it is. What it also means is, yes, they pay property taxes to themselves, or if they're paying for particular services like water or sewer.
they won't be paying them to the city.
They're not,
They can thank Kristen Grubb.
the federal government, the tribes are up here, state, and us are down here. So that's the relationship.
So, but basically what you're saying though is we wouldn't have any say if they wanted to build a casino or whatever, we wouldn't.
We have the ability to talk with them about the process, but we don't have a regulatory authority over it.
I just want one other question, then I'll sit down again for the rest. Okay, on that East Street, have you guys done an environmental study yet? Or I'm curious, or is it slated yet?
I'm not aware, I don't believe we've done.
There will be one though, right?
Yes, there is, it's a requirement of the project.
Okay, because one of our biggest concerns is the route you are proposing, and it's on your website, is going to the most treed area in that property, and you are going to destroy the wildlife habitat. And they have been there way before the city of Tumwater was existing. So, you know, I'd like to know if, I guess we just want to know what your plans are, because we're not being notified of anything. And we would just like to know, you know, before it's too late. So, anyway, but those are a lot of our concerns in that, so, okay.
We'll have to do environmental review. We haven't done it yet because we haven't got far enough yet with project design to do an adequate environmental.
Okay. Well, I just saw a piece of paper today that showed, the money that you want for that project, and it's also showing construction to start in 25 to 28. So if it hasn't been decided, then how can you come up with these figures? And how can construction start that soon?
5 sounds really ambitious for a project of that magnitude.
Yeah,
Well, it's on paper though. Okay.
I understand. Sir, you had a question.
So I had a question as far as like the Port of Olympia property, that they don't pay property tax there. That tax is shifted to the homeowners surrounding the airport. Same thing with tribal land. That tax burden is shifted to the landowners, the property owners around there. My question is, with the Port of Olympia, you have a lot of businesses that rent from the Port of Olympia, but that money goes to the port. There's no property tax made off of that revenue. Why is that?
Good question. I don't necessarily have an answer to the property tax side. What we do is collect business and occupation tax and sales tax. And so for things like that, we would have, that's part of the, you know, the positive of the employment is that it benefits the city and goes into the general fund that pays for improvements that support those kinds of uses.
Like with the truck stop and casinos, we provide emergency services, but they don't pay a dime for those services.
My question, I'm not sure if we have a contract with them.
I know right now with the Chehalis tribe, with the Lucky Eagle and that property, that's one of the biggest complaints that like West Thurston and those places have had, is because they don't pay for those services, but they are utilizing the services greatly. And then the other question I had real quick is on the East Street extension. I get why, you know, but logically, like when you were saying 8 lanes on Custer, never, I mean, that's never gonna be feasible, it's never gonna happen. But why would you spend $54 million on a bridge and then put a roundabout up there, which is still gonna create chaos, and not just go up to Custer and acquire the land? You could put a big roundabout right there at Custer or North Street, that area. Just throwing an idea out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, we have an online question. Where could someone go to get more information on being more involved with the housing challenges and how to be a part of coming up with solutions?
Actually, as part of any of these discussions, whether it's climate or housing or so forth, if you want to reach out to us, first of all, through the comp plan email address, or reach out to me personally, we can definitely go that way. That's probably the best way.
Hi, thanks for being here. My name's Paul Loringer. I've lived in Thurston County for 30 years and City of Tumwater for 2 years. And more of a statement than a question, but I was walking down Linderson Avenue on Saturday, past 2 old guys' handyman business with my friend, and then another couple was coming our way. We had to stop and stand in the ditch because there was cars coming, and they were walking by and they stopped and said, well, this is crazy. Why does this sidewalk end right here? We have all kinds of new development out there. So on the good, you're bringing the community together. I'm meeting my neighbors and, it just seemed really odd and it seemed like a big liability for the city too. So hopefully some of these orphan neighborhoods can be included with better bike trails and sidewalks. And then the second thing, on East Street, again, we have a very active community and active HOA, a lot of interest and a lot of stories around it. So I think the sooner you could get, more clarity, more information, keep us in the loop, I think it would help everybody. So, I appreciate you guys being here.
So very quickly on the sidewalk issue, I want to let you know that, first of all, when we're transitioning from, regional development in the area, which may have been under the county, may have been to more rural situations where sidewalks weren't put in the first place, as individual parcels and properties are developed, we usually require them to provide pedestrian access, sidewalks or some other path, formal path. Once that starts to happen, then we have the problem that you ran into, which is how all those things are connected. And that is something that we've been working with our transportation department on it. First of all, identifying the priority of connections where they need to be for safety, for volume of traffic, for everything else. And then number two, identifying the sources of funding for that. Whether that's part of a larger street project, whether that's independent of that, all those kinds of things. So as we make a transition, unfortunately, this isn't SimCity where we can just erase an entire neighborhood, start again. We have to work around everybody and what's existing on the ground and try to fit it all together as part of that process.
And a part of the climate change element development and the transportation element revisions will be that we'll be producing a bike and pedestrian plan for the first time for the city. So that will be focused on level of traffic stress, so how stressful the person on the bike or the walking feels about the vehicles near there. There's a Washington DOT method that we'll be using. We'll be setting targets for shifting people from cars into biking and walking and other forms of active transportation, as well as transit. So setting those goals for the first time, creating a plan for the first time, really look at the bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the city, and having those areas that feel dangerous. That's going to be part of the process, and we'd really like to hear that and place dots on a, might be a physical map, might be a digital map, not sure, but helping us identify those areas that don't feel safe for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Do we have anybody else? Okay. All right. You haven't spoken so far, and then
That's really a question but a comment. Some of the goals that I see stated here are in conflict with each other, and I'm sure you realize that. And what I'm thinking about is climate change. As you go down that road, that's going to impact disproportionately for and affordable housing, which I hear tonight is a big issue. So it's just something to keep in mind.
very quickly, one term I use a lot is balance. We have numerous needs and desires for doing things in the city. We want a better transportation system. We want more housing. We want more employment. We want to save the trees. We want to save this. We want to do that. We can't always do that in the same place. Our original idea of putting gophers and tree houses wasn't approved by the federal government. So that's definitely something that we have to work and try to figure out the best way of balancing all those things at once. I'm sorry.
All right. So Javier's given me some of his time, so let me clear up all the East Street for everybody here. So the East Street project was first suggested back in 2014. It was going to be straight across from East Street, up the hill, come out by OB Credit Union. Then Lot decided they were going to build down in the valley there, a couple of reclamation. Then in 2017 March, SCJ Alliance came up with their memorandum. So now they had to come up with 4 designs to accommodate the lot. If you look at it, first one was 1A. It was the old route straight up the hill. But now you had to have a road for lots. So back where your house is, right across the street, they were going to bring in a 2-lane road down past the water tank and over. But then it was like, well, why have two roads? So that's one way they came up with the route, which was gonna go over the river, over the railroad tracks, down, and then back up. And now what happens is you had 2A. The problem with that is that hillside there, you can't see it, but it's up higher than Cleveland. So what happens is they were gonna grade away the entire, first of all, this is the plan now, that in the name of climate change and environment, they're gonna tear down the trees. That is the most heavily forested portion of the old Tumwater Brewery that's still in existence. There's animals that have lived in there for generations. People I know who used to work at the brewery remember them there. And because it's been sealed off, it's become like its own little ecosystem in there. It's really beautiful if you ever peek in there and see stuff. So now they're gonna tear out all the trees. You got a 65-foot wide road. You're gonna tear out at least minimum 15 to 20 feet on either side for construction purposes. So you're talking 100-foot or more path down. Then they have to grade away the entire hillside to level it out. And then the plan, beautiful plan, is to slice away that entire hillside there, pulling it out, and they're gonna put in a retaining wall, which was valued at, what, $3 million, and that was in 2016 dollars. Who knows what it is now? Now, the reason they have to grade it out and put the longer retaining wall is because 2A was gonna be an 8% grade, because it was gonna go up into Cleveland. But they found out, well, we can make it a lower grade down to 6.5 by tearing out the entire hillside. Now that retaining wall is gonna be even longer. So here's the thing. So you get these arguments about them going back the original route, and they're saying, oh, no, that's 8% grade. No, it's not an 8% grade. It's 2.3 up and over the bridge, over the river, over there. It's a 6.3 grade to get up to Cleveland. That's all on the SCJ engineering reports. So we get to that point here. Now, here's the thing. The monkey with the wrench was Lot. Lot is not going to build there anymore. The city of Tumwater knows that. And yet, just August 29th of 23 here, where they had their update to the East Street Connection project, where they have it valued at $54 million now, they still showed the Lot access road in there. Why is the city building a road designed for Lot when Lot is not going to be there anymore? Now, Brad, you remember when we met you last year, we came up with an alternate because we're trying to be a compromise, trying to be good citizens and work with the city of Tumwater. If the city just took the road to the north side of the water tower, not farther down by Cleveland, which would be ideal, by OB Credit Union, but if they just bring it up there on the north side, go to Google Earth and look at the photos. There's hardly any trees there. And not only that, by saving with that over $3 million that you're gonna have on that stupid retaining wall, you can buy the piece of property that's right there. What that allows you to do by bringing it up north there, now you can put the roundabout off of Cleveland. So you don't have this disaster like we have on Prosper now. You have the road there. Then what happens is when it's all done, you bring Cleveland, you bring it in like that. Now you've not disrupted anybody's property. You don't disrupt traffic on Cleveland while you're building it. There'll be a couple of houses right across where you build a bump out, same as like at, Yorko that's on, Boulevard and, Yom Highway. There's a little bump out, the cars can go in. 2 homes. But this is a more effective, and with the money that you save, they can put a retaining wall around there, the same as the citizens of Olympia got from their community on Yom Highway. They'll protect the forest. It's a win-win for everybody.
I apologize. We do have others who would like to speak tonight.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that. Inclusion, though, I love this equity and inclusion, because you didn't include us in 2017. You haven't included us in over a year. We managed to go out to all our neighborhoods in just one weekend and talk to them. Why can't the city of Tumwater come out and be honest with it? All we ever hear is, thank you, we'll get back to you. Thank you for speaking, and you don't do it.
So I just have a note here that the planning and funding phase is what we're currently in, and the only thing that we've developed so far as a schedule is in the CFP, and that is really on the end of the 6-year window of the CFP, which is not are set in stone. We don't have a start date.
Yeah, but.
For the project,
Forget
yeah.
the start date.
No,
The thing is,
I
you've always-
apologize,
Yeah, you've always said,
sir.
you've always, wait, let me finish, and then you can, well, you said, when we met you last year, and Brandon Hicks and Heather Ames, in meeting with a reporter from the Olympian, said the same thing. There's no route, we don't have a route. Why is this the only one that you have funded for a design then? Why not the other ones?
And I can't answer that because
Because this is the route, you know it.
I wish I did, but
Yeah.
thank you for your comments, and thank you for everyone who came out as part of this. What I'd also like to encourage you is, in addition to the E Street project, which obviously is a very expensive and very important part of the community, there's a lot of other things that are happening, and a lot of other things that we think should be paying attention to and providing your input on. So I'd encourage, if there's anyone else who has any other questions or anything else, at this time, please.
So I live on, Roberts Road, so the current way that you've got this going will be about 20 feet off my back fence. And, there's, a whole family of deer that live there and bed down there all summer, and lots of animals and raccoons and squirrels and everything that my grandkids enjoy. But I'd like to ask for everybody to raise their hand that's here from Roberts Road or anything to do with E Street. Please raise your hand. 47th? Yeah, because we just don't like the way this is drawn. It needs to be on the north side of that water tower. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. We have anybody else?
I just have a quick comment. I just kind of want to leave it on a positive. Custer and Cleveland, the design of that is probably the best redesign I've ever seen for traffic flow. It works so well. So if whoever designed that out there on the staff.
I'm sorry, this is the first time that I come to a meeting, but it seems like there's a lot of details on your site and not enough explanation for it. I mean, I see that it's more than just a red line on a drawing. There's a funding, there is a description, and we don't have any answers. And I understand that this is not the only project that is being discussed, but if that is so well defined on your site, and we can get no answers for something that affects probably half the people that came up here tonight, there's a bigger issue to all this planning. And I'm just a bit confused. And I really would like to get a solid answer on where do we stand on this project. Is it a project? Is it something that somebody came and threw that red line and said, hey, this would be a great idea? Or is it something more?
So there's going around a sign-up sheet for everyone who would be interested in having a separate meeting to discuss the East Street project. Obviously, there's a lot of concerns and questions about that we're not able to answer tonight. I really do encourage you to add your name to that, and we'll have a separate meeting dealing with that issue, because I think we need to have people here have more experience with the project and be able to answer the questions that we're not able to do tonight. So, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Can you elaborate on what you meant by there's more things going on? You mean in that area, or?
No, what I meant was where the subject for tonight's open house is the broader comprehensive plan and everything that entails for the city, accommodating 11,000 new people and over 6,000 new housing units. So that's what I meant was East Street is an important component of that in terms of dealing with transportation in one part of the city. There are also issues with 93rd. There are also issues that I think also should be discussed as part of this process. That's what I meant.
There's one thing that I want out of the comprehensive plan. What I want is for my kid to have a place to live that he can afford. The state wants you to zone for 11,000 new people, but as you said earlier, it's the private sector. that is gonna develop the land and build those housing units, and you can't make them in the next 20 years. So I would encourage you to overshoot, zone for 13,000, zone for 15,000. The more housing you have, the cheaper it's gonna be, because I want my kid to live near me, and he wants to live near me. And the sooner those houses go in, the sooner he gets to have a place of his own. Thank you.
Yes, please, in the back, anything?
I just wanted, you to clarify, did you say that Parks and Recreation is not part of this planning process?
No, one of the.
You said something about they don't have any funding or
Yeah,
something.
so what I meant was, the Parks and Recreation and Open Space Plan is a part of the comprehensive plan. It is not a required element under the state periodic update. If there's not available funding identified or provided by the state for that update, we're not able to proceed with it unless we commit funds to do that update. As part of the last budget cycle, funding wasn't identified to do that, and so we're not able to do that update. We definitely recognize on the staff side the need to be updating that plan because it was originally done in 2018 and had 2008 and had a minor update in 2016. And it has not kept pace with everything else that has happened in the city. So on the staff side, we would like to be updating it, but we just don't have the staff or the funds to do that at this time. If that's something that you think that needs to be done, we strongly encourage you to talk to our city council. I'm sorry, ma'am? Oh, yes, please.
Is the city of Tumwater involved in the, project on, 93rd and Old Highway 99? Potential, YMCA?
That is a, that is a county amendment. I believe you're talking about property that's west of Old Highway 99.
Correct.
Currently, there is an application with Thurston County, because that entire area is part of Thurston County, for a comprehensive plan amendment to the county plan dealing with potential redevelopment of that area and potentially including that within the urban growth area. It hasn't reached the stage yet, from my understanding with talking with the county staff, that it's something that we have expressed interest in being involved in. Once they have basically committed the staff to be researching it and developing that process, we've said we're interested in dealing with that because that's obviously a potential expansion of our UGA. To date, that's where it stands. They filed an application, I think, a couple of years ago. It's on the docket to be dealt with by the county, but that is as far as I'm aware of.
Is 93rd the current, urban growth boundary?
Yeah, it approximately follows that.
Water this side, county the other side. Any chance, that in your comprehensive plan to move that urban growth boundary?
There is a potential for it, but we're not actively considering that because that is a very extensive process to undertake.
Everything you showed us, and it's hard to read from back here with these eyes, but, your breakdown on, household income, how's that calculated? Is that gross household income in those categories?
I believe so, but I have to look.
Taxable or non-taxable?
It's total before tax, I believe, but I can find out.
Just one anecdotal comment about Trosper Road. My brother came to see me, last Friday, and it's been a year and a half since he's been over, and I live out in Black Lake. He made the mistake of taking that exit. He was last sighted in Elma going.
I drove past him on that. We have one more question online, and then I think we're probably ready to wrap up for this evening. I presume, I want to make sure everyone has had a chance to sign up for the East Street conversation. Make sure that if you haven't, please do that. Erica?
When looking at developments, does the city look at environmental impact on neighboring land, such as where the pocket gophers go and the impact of the water level as well, etc.?
Yes, no, as part of the environmental review for projects that come into the city, we're follow what is known as the State Environmental Policy Act. And in addition to that, the city has a lot of its own regulations that have developed over time since that act was passed in 1971 that covers a lot of those issues. We definitely pay attention to the gopher. We don't have a necessarily good relationship with them, but we do talk with them occasionally. They talk to us. But yes, so if there's a development that is occurring on a piece of property, we take into account, first of all, what's occurring on that property, from everything from water to potential impacts to the air, earth, environment. We talked a little bit about trees. We talked about habitat for animals, all that kind of stuff. All of that is part of the environmental review for any project. So those kinds of things are taken into account when we do that. And based on that, based on the impacts from that particular project, the mitigation is designed to address those particular issues. So what I'd like to, when we finished with, I just want to thank everyone again tonight for coming. One thing I really do encourage you, and I think obviously I don't necessarily would like to go through the process of having to set up a separate meeting as we're doing the meeting, but any other topics besides East Street that you think we should be talking to, we're open to that kind of conversation as part of this process. So please let us know about those as well. We really thank you again for your participation. If you need more information, reach out to us. Send your calls and emails as soon as I possibly can. Thank you again.